So next couple of tests, they are known as waveform deviation factor and the telephone influence factor tests. They are similar in nature because they try to analyze that what is the type of waveform which is being generated and if there is some interference being caused to the communication lines and all around the power plant. So these two tests, WDF and TIF, they verify the purity of the sine wave that the generator produces. The tests require a spectrum analyzer type oscilloscope at the site. So as you might recall, and maybe I hope everyone must have done some experiments in their BTech first year with this oscilloscope thing. So where you can
Yes, in the CRO, sir.
right, and you can always analyze what type of waveform it is coming out. So this WDF, waveform deviation factor test, it compares the shape of the sine wave produced by the generator with that of a perfect sine wave. The deviation factor of the open circuit terminal voltage should be less than 10% of the phase-to-phase voltage. So that is some sort of a thumb rule that for the open circuit terminal voltage, that means your EB basically, or EA you can say, the EMF which is generated with open circuited terminal armature windings. The distortion or the deviation in that should be less than 10% of the phase-to-phase voltage. Usually a distorted sine wave must have a deviation factor of greater than 5% to be visible to the naked eye. So if it is below 5%, then it will not be, visual inspection will not actually help. It will be looking like a perfect sine wave. So the limit is, thumb rule is usually somewhat higher. Then there are some methods to determine this WDF by using analytical equations. Again, these are given in IEEE 115, but yeah, we'll not go into details of those now. The TIF, or the second one, the telephone influence factor test, that analyzes the harmonics produced by the generator and uses various weighting factors originally developed in 1935 by Edison Electric Institute and Bell Telephone to ensure that 60 Hz power generators should not produce harmonics that could interfere or influence the communication circuits. So this is because this reference is from US, so that's why they are talking about 60 Hz. In India, we'll be having 50 Hz power generator, but the concept remains same. The communication lines, the communication circuits, they operate at a very much higher frequency, in megahertz range. But the power of the signal which is there on the communication line is very low. So there can be a significant interference which can be induced into these from the power line to the communication line. So this TIF test, it analyzes the harmonics. Harmonics are basically the higher order frequency components. So the base or the fundamental frequency of power which we are generating is 50 Hertz, but usually because of the non-linearities in the circuit and some other particular complexities which is there with in any practical circuit, there are these some higher order harmonics or higher order frequency components which are also produced, usually the odd harmonics. So if you have 50 Hertz as the fundamental frequency, there will be a particular component of 150 Hertz, 250 Hertz, and like that, third harmonic, fifth harmonic, like that. So this test tries to analyze that what are these harmonics and how much effect they can cause on the communication lines based on some weighting factors which were developed long back. The weighting factors to be utilized for modern generators are listed in ANSI standard C50.13. So that is another standard which gives these weighting factors for modern generators. And the test method to obtain TIF values for generators is identified again in IEEE 115. So those are some of the standards which deal with this. We will not go into more details of this. So these were all the electrical tests so far what we discussed pertaining to the electrical parameters. Then there is something related to mechanical factors also, because as we understand the mechanical stability and rigidity of the machine is also a very critical thing. So mechanical test will just look briefly, not going into much detail. There are some tests which are done in the factory and then some which are done in the field. So let's look at the mechanical tests to be conducted in the factory testing. So in the factory, mechanical tests usually consist of two parts. One is the review of material test certificates, which confirms the purity or composition of the materials used for the various components. So that's very obvious that the material which has been used for manufacturing the machine, that should be of a proper quality and purity. So first is just the inspection of those certificates that the material is of proper specifications. And then you have some non-destructive examination NDE, which confirm that there are no flaws or anomalies or discontinuities in the component parts. So because as we discussed, the stator core is being assembled, and then you have the rotor which is being assembled, then you have the windings which insert there. So it necessarily the NDs, they discuss about these particular components, that there should be no flaw or anomaly in the way they have been assembled. So the extent of both these tests is dependent upon the generator size and can vary from a simple review of the rotor material test certificates for a small generator to the full range of liquid penetrant, magnetic particle, or ultrasonic testing of large generators. So these are some of these non-destructive examinations: the liquid penetrant, magnetic particle, and ultrasonic testing of generators to determine what is the the quality of the particular thing once it is assembled. Then how much is the you can say the integrity of the component. On the large generators, a hydrostatic test of each oil or air cooler should be performed, in addition to a shop alignment check of the combined turbine and generator shafts to help ensure that field problems do not occur. So those are also for large generators. So if you look at it, there is a whole range. So for the very small, the smallest quantity, the smallest size of generators, it is just saying that simple review of rotor material test might be needed. Whereas for medium range, you have the NDE tests, and for large generators, then you can, people go for the testing of the cooling side. I think also the hydrostatic testing of the cooling equipment, and the alignment of the turbine and generator shafts, those can also be undertaken. So those are usually the factory tests, the mechanical side. And then there can be some field tests, which are basically an extension of these only. So mechanical field tests for the generator can consist of these following, like a rotational check of the combined turbine generator shafts to ensure proper alignment. Again, so this is recommended for every generator, whereas in factory alignment, this was talking about only for large generators. So when you put it on field and connect it with the turbine shaft, then proper alignment should always be ensured. Hydrostatic tests of each oil or air cooler, confirmation of proper generator bearing or installation or clearances, confirmation of proper generator air gap clearance, brake operational tests, and tests to determine the flow rates and temperatures of incoming and outgoing cooling water for the bearings and air coolers. And in addition, a moment of inertia test and a runaway speed test are performed on some units. So those are all the mechanical tests. And depending upon the criticality and the size of the unit, some of these might not be taken, and larger generator probably all of these will be undertaken. So just a brief overview of these. So now we'll just quickly have a look at the because this mechanical test, we have talked about both factory and field testing, but when we were talking about the electrical testing, we were primarily talking about the factory tests. So with respect to the electrical tests, let's look at the field test as well, that when we are in the field, what tests are needed. Now this will depend upon what is the category of the generator. So as we have been discussing, category 1, 2, 3 and 4, depending upon the size of the generator. So there is one tables here. We'll look at these 2-3 tables for different categories of generators. So for category 1 and 2, as it says here, the efficiency of a factory assembled generator is documented with a test certificate in the factory. Therefore, an efficiency test is not required for category 1 or 2 generators in the field. So these category 1 or 2 generators, that is, as we discussed, that they have been assembled in the factory only. Category 1 has complete one unit, and category 2 has maybe 2 or 3 components, either rotor and stator separate or rotor and stator in 2 halves. So, but they have been primarily been assembled in the factory itself. So for these categories, the efficiency testing is not repeated in the field. It is just the factory test certificate is repeated. However, a no-load saturation test is performed in the field, and the developed curve checked against the factory no-load saturation curve. This verifies that the generator parameters have not changed in any way. So it is recommended that the no-load saturation tests, which we discussed earlier, for determining the parameters, the SCR, the short circuit ratio, and the synchronous impedance and all, All those things, those are coming from this no load and the short circuit saturation tests. So it is recommended that these can be again repeated in the field to ensure that the generator parameters are the same. A reduced value dielectric test should be performed in the field. So as we have been discussing, the first dielectric test which we discussed in factory, that is having a very high voltage. It is the winding is exposed to 2 times the rated voltage. In this case, it is saying for category 1 and 2 generators in field, the dielectric test can be performed, but at a reduced value, not at the 2 times of the rated phase voltage. The reason for the reduction in voltage for these dielectric tests is that the generator has already passed the full value dielectric tests at the factory, and we do not want to needlessly stress the insulation. So that is the reason behind that. And usually a DC dielectric test is performed rather than an AC dielectric test. So as we discussed earlier, also even the voltage level recommended for DC dielectric test is lesser. It is only 1.7 times of the rated voltage. And moreover, it says here because DC testing is considerably less destructive if a failure occurs. In addition, the DC dielectric test equipment is light, portable, and readily available in the field, whereas the higher voltage AC test equipment is large, expensive, and often difficult to locate. So due to some logistical and practical constraints, usually when we do in the field, it is the DC dielectric test that to at a reduced value of voltage. So combining all these things and together, this is the table for field tests for category 1 and 2 generators. So insulation resistance test of armature and field windings, including polarization index values for both. Reduced value dielectric test of armature and field windings, phase rotation check, no load saturation curve. Dynamic balancing of rotor, it is a mechanical test at 125% of rated speed. Temperature rise test, waveform deviation factor, telephone influx factor, hydrostatic test of each oil or air cooler if applicable, rotational check of combined turbine and generator shafts, operation of brakes, test to determine flow rates and temperatures of incoming and outgoing cooling water for bearings and air coolers, overspeed test, and short circuit withstand test. So all these tests are usually recommended in the field for category 1 and 2 generators. That means up to 20 megawatt or 20 MVA, we should say. So to 20 MVA, these are the recommended tests in the field. Then next category, as we can understand, this is somewhat more intense because category 3 generators, they have the range of power rating in 20 to 50 MVA range. And as it says here that category 3 generators have the rotor completely assembled in the factory, and complete assembly of the stator, that means the core stacking, etc., is required in the field. So in this case, the rotor is coming completely assembled from the factory, but the assembly of the stator is done entirely from scratch in the field. So these are some tests recommended for this. So resistance test of field armature winding, dielectric test of armature winding, phase rotation check, stator core loop test. List is a little longer, as you can see. There are some extra tests. Phase rotation check, no load saturation curve, short circuit saturation curve, dynamic balancing of rotor, efficiency calculation using values from 1, 6, and 7 above, or a separate recommended efficiency test. Temperature rise test, waveform deviation factor, TIF, hydrostatic test, rotational check, operation of brakes, test to determine flow rates and temperature of incoming and outgoing cooling water, overspeed test, fire protection system test, moment of inertia, runaway speed test, and short circuit withstand test. These last three are not so common. So the list is slightly longer because, as you can understand, it is more intense also, and also the reason is that the stator we are assembling right from scratch in the field itself. And finally, the last category, which is the biggest generators, category 4 generators. These, as we have been discussing, have rating above 50 MVA, and the complete assembly of both the stator and the rotor occurs in the field. So here the list is actually much longer because, as it says, the first point is all tests listed in factory tests for categories 1 and 2 generator assembly except numbers 10, 12, and 13. So all these, out of these 14, 11 will come here. So 10, 12, and 13 except those, all these are there. And then apart from that, there are these, some of the extra tests which are mentioned here. So those are the, I mean, more or less it comes similar. If you look at this list and the category 3 list, it is more or less similar with maybe 1 or 2 extra tests. So this is all the field tests, and so this completes our discussion on the testing of generators. Anyone has any questions or any input or any short discussion, you can have. Otherwise, we move to the next topic. Okay, so I hope it is clear for all, and we'll move ahead. So this basically completes our discussion about the generator, which is the, as you can understand, we are talking about the hydroelectric equipment. So generator is the primary equipment because that is what is generating the power. But then just the generator alone is not there in a power plant. There are a lot of other things also which come along with that and which ensure the proper operation of the power plant. So in our forthcoming classes, we will be looking at the other components, which are the important constituents of a particular hydropower plant. So generator we have done in detail, in thorough. Both we started with the conceptual understanding, and then we looked at some analytical equations, and then we looked at some practical details, the type and construction of hydro generators, and then finally the testing of the generators. So all these things we have covered in detail. Now we will be, after this, we'll be starting with the governor mechanism. So governor mechanism is also a very important mechanism for controlling the speed of the generator. Then we will be also looking at the excitation control. So the field winding, as we've been discussing, the field winding is getting some excitation, some DC input from a particular DC source, and based on that DC input, the DC current that creates the magnetic field in the machine, and based on that, the entire electromagnetic principle works. So that excitation control and few things related to that also will be.
Sir, I'm not able to watch the slides.
Yeah, I'm not showing it right now.
Okay.
So yeah, so I'm just briefing what all we are going to do in future, and then we'll come to that. So after generator, we'll be doing the governor mechanism in 2 or 3 classes maybe, and we'll start with governor today itself. Then we will be going to excitation control and discussing about the excitation system, and then we will be looking at something related to power factor correction, because that is an important thing which is very important in modern power systems, because in modern power systems you have a lot of loads which are inductive or capacitive in nature. So especially like with the increasing electronic load, the power electronic equipments and the computers and the IT load, which we call as, the system is becoming more and more complex that way in terms of the non-linearity which is coming into picture, and that it has got an impact on the power factor. So we will look at the power factor correction methods and techniques also, and then we will be looking at the the protection part, the relays and the circuit breakers and type of arrangement needed for the protection of the equipment, and then some details of the switchyard and all those will be covered. So that will complete the discussion on the hydraulic. So going ahead, now after generators, we will go to the next unit, which is very nearby, which is very much integral with the generator, but it's needed for controlling the speed of the generator, and that is the governor mechanism. So let's share this thing. So this governor here is basically a speed controller. So let's first look at the underlying principle. So as we know, electrical energy is produced by a generator driven by a prime mover, which is usually a turbine or a diesel engine, or can be a steam turbine, hydro turbine, it can even be a wind turbine. So some prime mover is driving your generator. Now this turbine actually is equipped with the governor mechanism, which controls the speed of the generating unit according to a predefined power frequency characteristic. So we will look at that power frequency characteristic, and these two quantities are very much related. The power which you are generating, or what is the demanded power from the machine, and at what frequency it is operating. They have a very close connection, very integral connection. So, and why this connection is coming, it's described here in the second paragraph, is that as you understand, all prime movers tend to behave in a similar fashion. As the power drawn from them increases, the speed at which they turn decreases. So, I mean, that's a common, I mean, you can understand it with common understanding also. Your logic symbol is that, like any machine, if it is rotating at a given speed, and now you suddenly increase the loading or the power demand from that machine. So what on the load side, if you increase the power demand, so as you can understand that the equilibrium at which it was operating, that the mechanical power you were supplying and the electrical power you were drawing were in an equilibrium, and the machine was rotating at a particular speed. But now what has happened is that in case of a generator, now the electrical power demanded, the load on the power demand on the load side, that has increased suddenly. So as we can understand, this equilibrium will get disturbed. So now the electrical power demanded is more, whereas your mechanical power, it can also increase with time, but instantaneously it is at that same value. So there is a mismatch. So due to this extra power demand and the same power coming from the input side, obviously the machine will slow down. The rotation speed will tend to slow down. So this decrease in speed is, if you look at the actual characteristic or the details of the mechanism, it is actually non-linear in nature. But this governor mechanism is designed in such a way that this decrease in speed can be approximated with a linear curve. So practically speaking, if you look at the very except the governor mechanism, if you just look at the the dynamics of the machine, and if you have an extra power demanded, then usually that behavior is sort of non-linear. But with the governor mechanism in place, we try to ensure the governor is designed in such a way that this decrease in speed as the power demanded increases suddenly is sort of becomes a linear curve. And there is a name for this variation of speed with respect to the power demanded. It is known as the speed droop. So it is not drop, rather it is droop. So droop means slightly, it's like not a very sudden drop. It is from a particular value. There is a sudden droop. There is a very gradual decrease. The slope is low. So the speed droop of a prime mover is defined by this equation. Speed droop is equal to NL. N is the speed at no load, and then minus NFL, which is the speed at full load, divided by NFL, the full load speed, into 100%. So as we understand, this will always be, the no load speed will always be what? With respect to full load, will it be higher or lower?
Higher.
Higher.
Very good. So because as you increase the loading, the speed tends to drop. So it's very well understood that no load speed will always be higher, because as you drop the load, the speed will tend to accelerate. So this will always be a positive number. So this thing, the variation in the speed, you can define it as, like, the speed group can be defined as that if from the full load rating of the operation of the machine, if the load is suddenly thrown off, then how much is the increase in the speed in, as expressed as a percentage of the full load value. So no load speed minus full load speed divided by the full load speed as a percentage, 100%. So now most generator prime movers have a speed group of 2 to 4%. So as you can see, that the value is not really high. The speed group is in very small range. And so basically what happens is that if you throw off the complete load also from full load, the speed can accelerate, but in a small range, 2 to 4%. In addition, most governors have some type of set point adjustment to allow the no load speed of the turbine to be varied. So the no load speed itself can be adjusted. So let's look at this, what it looks in terms of a graph. So this one here on the left hand side, this graph is the speed droop curve. So you have the mechanical speed of the machine in RPM, revolutions per minute, plotted on the y-axis, and the power demanded from the machine, the electrical power output in kilowatts on the x-axis. So as you can see, this is the point particular PFL is the full load power rating, or the the rated power of the machine. And at this point, whatever is the speed, that is the full load speed. So at the rated value of the power, the machine will be operating at this particular operating point on the speed droop curve. And now if let's say the power demand increases, so that means we will be shifting from here to somewhere higher on the positive x side. So if power demand increases, then PFL, the power demand is greater, the new P2, we can say the P2 will be greater than PFL somewhere on this side. And as you can see, as per the speed droop curve, the speed will tend to decrease. And vice versa is that if your power demand gradually decreases, or instantaneously decreases from this PFL to some other P3 here on the lower side, so as you can see, the speed will tend to accelerate or increase. So that type of with the governor mechanism in place, you can approximate it with a linear curve like that, the speed droop curve in this form. Now, as we said, the power and frequency have a very integral characteristic. So on the right hand side here, if you see, this is the power versus frequency curve. So can you say how this curve is related to the curve on the left hand side? Can someone say how the right curve is related to the left curve?
So the speed depends on frequency.
Yeah, who is that, Pranit?
Yes.
Yeah, so what is the relationship between speed and frequency?
Sir, so that first formula we have written.
Sir, F equals Pn by 120.
Sir, omega
Equals to Pn by 120.
Right, the frequency at which you generate the electrical power, that is equal to number of poles multiplied by the synchronous speed divided by 120. So that is one very fundamental equation which governs the operation of the synchronous generators, and we should always keep that in mind. So as you can see, because number of poles is fixed for any generator, 120 is just a constant number. So the frequency is directly proportional to the synchronous speed, and that's why of this n, if we multiply with this n with a fraction, a factor of p by 120, then we straight away we convert this into a frequency. So that's why the frequency will actually exactly follow this speed droop curve, and therefore this power versus frequency, or frequency versus power plot, is also having the same characteristic as the speed droop. And that's why it says here in the beginning is that there is a very strong linkage between these two. And the power and frequency characteristic, they are very tightly linked together. So the same phenomena occurs here also, as you can understand, is that your initially, let's say the machine is operating with delivering its rated power output, PFL, and it is operating at this point. So corresponding to that, the frequency is at this value, full load value, which will be how much in India? What is the full load value of frequency?
So 50 hertz.
Sir, 50 hertz, sir.
Right. So this will be FFL in Indian condition. If you're talking about, this is 50 hertz. So at the rated power output, it is operating at 50 hertz. Now, suddenly, if you say, let's say suddenly the power demand increases, then again this point will tend to shift towards the right, and accordingly the frequency will tend to drop. Whereas if this particular power demand suddenly it reduces, this point shifts to the left, and the frequency tends to increase. So what would you like? Would you like the frequency to increase or decrease?
Constant, sir.
We want it to be constant.
Right. We always want it to be constant. It should not actually vary. In fact, the desirable range is very low. I mean, ideally what we would want is that if it is at 50 hertz, then maybe it can vary in plus minus 0.1 hertz. So 49.9 to 50.1. That is like the ideal condition. At worst case, even in the worst performance case, maybe plus minus 0.5, or even worst of worst case plus minus 1. That is it. So the range of frequency deviation allowed is very stringent, it is very low. So ideally what we would want is that this frequency remains constant, neither shifts up nor goes down. So, but suppose now in this case, let's say that the power demand suddenly increases. So as we can understand by this curve and the discussion we had so far, that frequency will it will tend to drop. So what can we do to ensure, suppose the power demand has increased, what can we do that it doesn't droop down? What can be done looking at this curve?
Sir, we can increase the speed.
Right. So So as you can understand here is that we have our frequency versus power curve, and as we have been discussing, this is a slightly drooping curve like that, and let's say the full load power demand is this much. Accordingly, you have your full load or rated frequency here, and this is your no load frequency. Now, as we said that suddenly, let's say the power demand increases and it goes to some particular value P1 here. So as per this graph, if we don't do anything, this will tend to decrease. With P1 power demanded, the frequency will tend to come down to this value. But we don't want this to happen. So what we will have to do is that we'll have to basically shift the graph upwards. So if I shift it by some amount, the graph will be parallel, but if I shift it something like that, so now what I can see is that now the intersection point is somewhere here. So this is now the new operating point, and that will ensure that the frequency is same as the rated frequency or the full load frequency as before, even with a higher power demand. And same way, if it shifts somewhere this side, let's say it comes to this lower side P2, again we understand that if I don't do anything else, if I just the generator operating like that, then frequency will tend to increase to this other value. But I don't want that to happen. So what I will do now in this case is that I will shift your this thing, the curve to the lower side, parallel to that, slightly lower, so that your intersection occurs here, and now again this is constant. So idea is that if this power demand is shifting either to the higher side or to the lower side, accordingly your this FNL, the no load frequency, needs to be adjusted. So if your power demand is increasing, you increase this as well, and then you shift the graph up so that frequency, operating frequency is same. Same way, if the power demand is decreasing, then you shift this one down so that again the operating point remains same. So we always want to stick to this operating point. This whatever is the full load frequency, that is on this horizontal line only we want to operate. Depending upon how much is the power demand, this can be shifted, the curve can be shifted up or down. So accordingly, your different operating points can be there, and this is obtained by varying this no load frequency to obtain the final operating frequency same as the full load value or the rating. That is what is mentioned here, is that in addition, most governors have some type of set point adjustment to allow the no load speed of the turbine to be varied. So that will become very important, very handy in the practical operation of the power plant, is that whenever you have a power demand fluctuation and you want to operate the plant in tandem with the grid, frequency has to be kept constant. So you'll need to vary this no load point up or down depending upon the power demand. And this is what the function of the governor is basically. So this governor is a very important, as you can understand, because in any real power system there will be it will be a very vast, huge system having a lot of thousands or millions of loads actually, and the actual power demand will keep on fluctuating with time. So it's a very real-time operation. It's not like it is not done manually. It is not done by any hand. So the governor has a control mechanism where it keeps sensing that what is the operating frequency and how much is the power demand. Accordingly, it keeps adjusting the operating frequency. So this is a real-time thing, and this governor mechanism is the control mechanism which takes care of this particular thing in an operation of a real-time power plant, that the operating frequency has to be kept constant. That because we don't want this frequency to vary in plus minus 0.1. That is what is the desirable range. So what we would like to have is that 49.9 to 50.1 Hz, that type of a stringent control we want. So this thing comes, this is to ensure that the frequency is operating in this range, the function lies with the governor mechanism. So it's a very, very critical and hydro power plant, or any power plant for that matter, for our case we are talking about. Any questions?
Sir, this is Prashant.
Yes, sir, I want.
Yes, Prashant, please go ahead.
Sir, how to shift that curve from that is upward or downward? That is by increasing the that means supply or anything more way is there?
No, yeah, so that is how it is done. That basically what you want is that your no load speed should increase or decrease. And basically how will that be done is that your turbine speed will increase or decrease. And how turbine speed will increase is that the flow of the fuel will be regulated, will be increased or decreased. So when we talk about a hydro turbine, basically the opening of the wicket gates, or if you talk about the Pelton turbine, then the opening of the nozzle through which the water is being impinged on the turbine, that will be varied. So it's same, as simple as that. Basically the mechanical movement of the gates, wicket gates, or the opening of the nozzles, that is what will be monitored.
And sir, the slope will be constant for a particular turbine?
Very true. The slope will be constant. So depending upon the construction parameters, this slope will be constant. Only it will be shifting parallel to the thing. Yeah.
Okay, so it is constant for a particular turbine or any whole system? That is
for a given turbine. For a given turbine generator set, this will be constant. If you vary the construction parameters, the slope will be varied.
Okay.
Yes, anything else? Someone else was also asking something. Yes, from the viewer.
Sir, in that graph, typical speed versus power. No, sir.
This
yes,
one?
sir. Yes, on this first one. Sir, here PN is the full load maximum power.
The rated power, not maximum. Please note, maximum. We should not say this is a maximum. This is the rated power. Please always recall the discussion when we were discussing about the generator concepts, that the maximum power which the generator can deliver is always very high. So the rated power or the full load power is usually half or less than half of the rated the maximum power. So that's why it can go on either side. It's not the maximum. It is just the rated value. And rated is, as you can remember, the delta, what we discussed, 3E5, 3 EAB5 by XS into sine delta. So that operating point delta is usually kept in 20 to 30 degree range. And accordingly, if you take the sine, even if you have delta at the higher side, 30 degree, then also the power is half of the maximum. So it's not the maximum, it's just the rated or the full load power.
Okay, sir.
And anything else? This is the basic principle, the underlying principle behind the operation of the governor. We will look at more things as we go ahead, but this should be very clear. What is this governor? Why it is there in place? How does it? What is the underlying principle behind this? So this relationship, which we saw this particular type of frequency power plot, this can, because it's just simply nothing but a linear curve, and this, as we said, there's discussed also that this linearity is ensured by the governor design of the governor within itself. So this linear relationship, it can be simply stated like this, just linear equation. So the power output is equal to the SP is the slope of this curve multiplied by FNL minus the system frequency or FSys. So this slope of this curve will be defined, as you can understand, it will be having the units of kilowatt per hertz or megawatt per hertz. So, power by frequency, and this slope will depend upon the design parameters of the turbine generator set, and for a given machine it will be constant, but for different machines it can have different values. So this is there. Let's look at the basic operating principle in somewhat more detail. Is that, I mean, as this question was also there, so the answer is given here. That a prime mover has typically a throttle valve whose position, open or close, is adjusted continuously by a control device called the governor. So the governor basically is controlling the opening and closing of whatever the valve mechanism or the pitot gate or whatever is there for the flow of fuel or either steam or water or what type of turbine is there. So that particular fuel which is going to the turbine, which is driving the turbine, motion of the turbine, the opening or closing of that particular valve is what is being monitored by the governor. So the governor senses the speed changes of the turbine and controls it to a predefined set point value. So we can say governor is thus a mechanism which controls the unit speed by adjusting, that means increasing or decreasing the power flow into the prime mover to change the mechanical power output to compensate for load changes and thus to maintain frequency at a desired value. So that is how you can basically define a governor. So this definition here, you can treat that as the sort of the formal definition for a governor mechanism. That it is a mechanism which controls the unit speed by adjusting, that is increasing or decreasing the power flow into the prime mover to change the mechanical power output to compensate for load changes and thus to maintain frequency at a desired value. So the driving thing here, what will initiate the action on the part of the governor is the load changes, and how the governor monitors that power output or load change is by controlling the power flow going into the prime mover or the turbine. So we can basically define, we can create this type of simple block diagram for understanding the behavior of the governor. So this is basically the control scheme for the overall generating unit, and as probably, those from electrical background must definitely be aware about the control, how you make the control diagram, the control systems, so you must have studied this. For others also, it is very simple. If you look at it, what is happening, your generator is here, and it is connected to some load, and it is operating at a particular steady state. So the mechanical power is coming from the prime mover or the turbine, as we understand. So this turbine is driving the generator, and this generator is driving some load, which is having some particular rated or whatever, at a given operating point, this is the value of the load, P elect. And this is in a particular state of equilibrium, and it is operating at some given frequency omega, rotation speed omega. Now, as we said, is that if you disturb this equilibrium by changing the value of the load, so the power input to the generator, P mechanical minus the P electrical. So as you understand, so that's why here, if you see the symbol, this is basically a summation block, and you have the mechanical power coming as positive, electrical power as negative, because that is the load. So the net is here. So as you can understand, if it is in equilibrium, there is no extra power input fed to this, and that's why the speed is constant. There is no acceleration. It is moving at a constant, rotating at a constant speed. But if I increase, let's say if I increase this load or P elect, then this P mech minus P elect becomes negative. So that means whatever was the equilibrium operating point, now the power is lower than that. So this generator speed will tend to decrease due to that negative power. And what now this governor does is that it basically has either a speed sensing or a frequency sensing mechanism, because speed and frequency are directly linked. There are different mechanisms. Many times for very rigorous operation, both are ensured that you sense both the speed as shaft speed as well as the frequency. But either way, if you sense even one of those, that is okay. So that goes as an input to the governor. So as soon as there is a disturbance here, this omega will change from its reference value. So there is a reference power output and a reference speed, which is given as the set point to the governor. So those are like the inputs or the control inputs for this governor mechanism. So as there is a disturbance here, this omega changes, and in case of power increasing, the electrical demand increasing, this omega basically decreases. So this is being sensed by the governor in real time, and as soon as it senses that okay, the frequency has dropped, now what it will do is that the control mechanism is designed such a way that it will increase the power input to the prime mover, P fuel. So now this will depend how the P fuel will be increased. So in a steam turbine, basically the rate at which the coal is being fed to the boiler and the rate at which the steam is being generated, that will be increasing. Whereas in a hydro turbine, simply the wicket gate opening or the nozzle of the Pelton turbine, that opening will be increased, so that the extra power is being fed to the prime mover, the hydro turbine, and it will accelerate, and then Pmac will increase, and now again a new equilibrium will be achieved, where Pmac and Plec are again in tandem in equilibrium, and now the omega will be again restored to its reference value. So this type of control loop, you can always explain the behavior through the same way. If you decrease the speed, either way, I mean decrease the load, again Pmac minus Plec becomes positive, and this tends to accelerate. Again, the governor senses that there is a tendency to accelerate, so it will decrease the fuel input. The wicket gates will be closed slightly, or the nozzle will be reduced, and that way the water hitting the prime mover will be lesser, and this Pmac will tend to decrease, and again new equilibrium will be established with this Plec. So this type of control loop can be used for explaining the functioning of the governor. Any questions on this?
Sir, Prashant here.
Yes, Prashant, go ahead.
Sir, that omega is mechanical angular speed, no?
Right.
That omega. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And both omega reference also.
Yeah, very good.
Okay.
Sir,
Yes.
Pranit. Sir, the video you showed earlier, sir, where was the governor in that?
Yeah, governor is basically a control thing, a control algorithm, you can say. So it's basically a controller. I mean, it's not a mechanical thing as such. It's basically a computer program. These days, we'll look at that as we go ahead in the next class. There are different categories. So initially, there used to be electromechanical governors. Then there came analog governors based on analog electronic circuits. But these days, it is basically digital governors. So it's not a physical entity per se. It will be these days. It will be basically a computer program on a particular your digital computer system, and its input will be how it will be connected is that the actuating input from the governor, it will control. It will be through some motor or some particular controlling mechanism. It will control the opening and closing of those wicket gates. So it's not a physical device per se. It's basically a control mechanism.
Okay.
I mean, physically also, when you go to a power plant, there will be some particular device or equipment, depending upon what type of they are using, whether electromechanical or something. If they have digital governor, it will basically computer. Which will be there.
Sir, if not digital, where it generally presents near the turbine?
No, it would be usually in the control room, right? So it's the control thing. No? So it will be, again, electromechanical ones can be placed near the thing also, but I mean, this electromechanical is completely ruled out at present. So any power plant you visit, there is no electromechanical governor anymore these days. In electromechanical governor, probably you will have it close to the turbine. So these days, it's just the digital governors. So they will be in the control room, and the signals will be going to controlling the gate opening.
Okay.
Okay, anything else?
No, sir.
Okay, so we will stop here for today's class, and we will continue the discussion in the next class.